On today's episode of the Locked On Texan podcast, what does life after Danielle Hunter look like? Should Houston go looking for their contingency plan in the 2025 draft? And is there trouble for Tank Dell in his future as a Houston Texan?
You are Locked On Texans, your daily podcast on the Houston Texans. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Battle Rat Nation! Bulls on Parade, welcome to today's episode. We are your credential media members. I'm John Hickman with the slick Casario vest back, and I'm the man with the big hat and the even bigger smile with the big H on his chest. Repping Houston, Brian Big Sarge Barfield. Thank you for making us your first listen of the day and for being a part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. On today's show, we'll be looking at blessings in disguise. Some things that happened last year, Sarge, that we were pissed about then, but actually turned out to be good for the Houston Texans in the long run. And I don't want to necessarily say trouble for Tank, but this year we know that the Houston Texans will address the wide receiver position in the draft. What does that mean for Tank Dell's future moving forward after the 2025 season, as we all believe that he will not play a single down? We open up today's show looking at life after Danielle Hunter. Should the Houston Texans go ahead and start planning for their contingency plan if that player is a draftee or if that player is already on the roster? Before we dive into any of that, Big Sarge.
Greetings and salutations, John Hickman.
Let's have a big show. Two big personalities squeezing in. A big reason why you guys are here. And that's talking Texans. Danielle Hunter, Texans locked up Hunter for another year as the two sides agreed to a contract extension worth $35 million this offseason. He'll be here for at least another 2 seasons this year. Next, Houston has Will Anderson on a rookie deal and can pick up his 5th-year option. The Texans would need to exercise this option. They haven't done so far in 2025, but they would have to do so by next offseason in 2026. The current depth chart for the edge position for the Houston Texans looks like Darrell Taylor, 1-year deal, a deal that I really like. Derek Barnett, 1-year deal. Dylan Horton, 29 tackles in 2 seasons. Keep in mind of his personal situation. He has only seen 26 and 25% of the defensive snaps to start his career in back-to-back seasons, which is actually promising, all things considered. Coming out of TCU, he finished his final season with nearly 11 sacks and 15 tackles for loss. He's under contract for 2 more seasons. And Danico Autry, the vet, who is currently under contract for 1 more season. Big Sarge, I have a lot to say about this conversation, but I want to hand it over to you. What does the future look like once Danielle Hunter and Houston reach the end of those agreed terms?
Well, John, I'm glad that you brought up some of those names that you brought up, and the name that stood out to me the most was Dylan Horton. And, you know, him coming back from the situation in which he did, everybody knows his medical situation that he had to deal with that caused him to cut his rookie season short. And so when you look at him getting back on the field, him getting acclimated to playing, I got an opportunity to speak with Dylan Horton at the end of the season, and you could just tell that his spirits was high, that he was in, you know, had a good mindset. And he's a guy that can actually play. They speak highly of Dylan Horton around NRG when it, you know, talking to Rod Wright about Dylan, and he says that young man has a very, very bright future. And so you can look at a player like Dylan Horton who could, you know, use another year of tutelage under Danielle Hunter. Also, you know, playing with Will Anderson Jr., learning some tips and some tricks from him, and, you know, Danico Autry. But John, there may be another, and I know we're going to talk about biggest blessings in disguise later on, but there may be another blessing in disguise in Solomon Byrd. I don't know if you remember the Houston Texans drafted him out of USC, and you know, he has the physical makeup and the skill set to be able to play in that DeMeco Ryans led defense. DeMeco Ryans, Matt Burke. Let me start making sure that I give Matt Burke, because he is the defensive coordinator and he's a very good guy and he knows his stuff. But to play in that DeMeco Ryans / Matt Burke system, All he needs is the reps. And so he's going to have a very, very, very good training camp in order for him to get on the field this season, in order for him to there's a lot of vets in front of him. There's a lot of vets in front of him with a lot of experience, and they brought in some guys from free agency. So, you look at Solomon Bird, but John, if we're going to go into the draft, and if you're looking at taking two players in the draft. So if the Houston Texans stay at 25, and now it comes back to the thing that you and I have been talking about for a very long time, best player available versus need. You and I have said that they need a wide receiver too. They need an offensive lineman. They need an interior offensive lineman. But if Shamar Stewart from Texas A&M is there, does DeMeco Ryan say, no, I want him. I need that player right there, because he is at that time what we're going to need to replace Danielle Hunter in a year or two, get him into the system already, get him acclimated to playing behind Danielle Hunter, get him into that rotation. And you can see, John, he's he reminds me a lot of Jadeveon Clowney. And when I say that, I'm talking about his athleticism and with his size and his stature, but his athleticism and his ability to dominate from his position. And he also has the speed and the power to be able to get to the quarterback. But that's where the biggest issue comes in, because remember last season we talked a lot about pressures, and they weren't sacks just yet. And they came later for Danielle Hunter as well, for Danielle Hunter and Will Anderson Jr. But Shamar Stewart at A&M, he created a lot of pressure on the quarterback. He just couldn't complete the play and get the sack. And that's where one of his weaknesses is. That's where everybody talks about him being, what he could be. He could be the next Myles Garrett, but he doesn't have enough sack numbers under his name in order for them to say that. So his pressure rate, his athleticism, very powerful off the edge. And then, John, there's another guy that I want to mention real quick, and I have to go to my text messages, because shout out to a friend of the show, Cole Thompson, who helped me with this name, Princely Ueman Lalem. Defensive edge rusher. I'm sorry if I butchered that name. I'm just going to call him Princely U, right? Out of Ole Miss. 6'4", 244 pounds. John played at Florida for 4 years before transferring to Ole Miss. And when he got to Ole Miss, ended up with 10.5 sacks on the season. I think that tied a school record. And he also made first team All SEC, second team All American. And so I wouldn't, if he's available, I wouldn't take him in the first round, but I would look at taking him in the second round when the Texans pick.
I want to kind of continue this conversation on the other side before we talk about Tank, but I do want to add a couple of things. Life after Danielle Hunter does not have to be an edge rusher. And I think that's the beauty of what we've seen from Roy Wright getting the most out of his guys and this defense all together. They can be able to put players out there to be successful in a specified role. And Houston could go with the approach of getting an elite defensive tackle or a defensive tackle with elite traits that they can coach up to be an elite defensive tackle. And that gives Houston a lot of flexibility to go and get that player in a third round. They got 2 third-rounders, or maybe later in the draft. I personally don't think that they should go that route with the first 2 picks. I could be wrong. If they really like Nolan out of Ole Miss, or if they really like Kenny Grant out of Michigan, that's where they're going to go. But it could definitely be an inside guy, an inside defensive lineman to pair with Will Anderson moving forward. When we come back, I want to finish this conversation, and then we'll dive into trouble for Tank Dell and his future with the Houston Texans.
As a small business owner, your work doesn't end when the clock hits 5. Your business is always on your mind, which means when it's time to hire, you need a partner that works just as hard as you do. That's where LinkedIn Jobs comes in. When you clock out, LinkedIn clocks in. LinkedIn makes it easy to post your job for free, share it with your network, and get qualified candidates all in one place. Post your job on LinkedIn, new feature, and it can help you write job descriptions and then quickly get your job in front of the right people with deep candidate insights. And here's a pro tip. Add the hashtag hiring frame to your profile picture to double your reach to qualified candidates. No wonder 72% of small businesses say LinkedIn helps them find high quality hires. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedonnfl. That's linkedin.com/lockedonnfl to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. Battle Red Nation, welcome back to Wednesday edition of the Locked On Texans podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. All right, John, before we start talking about Texans wide receiver Tank Dell, you wanted to finish up about life after Danielle Hunter. You had a couple of more things that you wanted to add to that.
Yeah, man, I think it's very important for Houston to find that contingency plan. All offseason, we've talked about finding the guy, whether it be free agency or the draft, and honestly, in the draft, because it gives Houston flexibility long term, but finding a guy that you can pair with some of these bigger contract players that we will be expecting to see soon. So last year they did it with Kamari Lassiter, Derek Stingley, right? And that worked out for Houston. This year you look at bringing over C.J. Gardner-Johnson, but also having Kalen Bullock already under contract. So that worked out, right? For Houston, it's important, I think, to do the same for Will Anderson. It's also important for them to do the same for and with Nico Collins. And when I look at life after Danielle Hunter, gave you guys the numbers, extended this offseason for another $35 million. And so I think he'll be making almost $50 million for 2026. That number is extremely high. Houston really likes him. This is what Nick Caserio had to say about Danielle Hunter.
It's going to result in whatever production. I mean, we had some players last year that kind of fit the bill. I mean, Danielle obviously had a really good year, and he's a premium player, so there was a cost associated with that, so we went ahead and paid that amount. So maybe there's another player in a different category. That's part of our job. That's part of the pro scouting staff's job, is to identify those players, find out where the opportunity is, and maybe there's a mismatch from a market standpoint, and just try to make a good, smart decision.
I think what the more important thing moving forward is how can you prepare for the market, right? Yeah. And so that's the main reason why we're having this conversation. In the past, Houston has a history of signing guys to one-year deals and moving on from them after a productive season. Ogbo Okoronkwo, Sheldon Rankins, Mario Addison, and even Rasheem Green, who had a pretty decent year for the Houston Texans. The name that I really like for Houston's contingency plan is Darrell Taylor, who they signed in the offseason. Coming off 3 sacks this past year, 5.5 the year before that for Seattle. His career high, 9.5 in 2022 with Seattle. I really like what he can bring from a play standpoint. I really believe that Houston could use him for a 2 to 3 year time period, and also combining and adding room to the edge position by, like we talked about, going and finding a late round gem for the future. When you have a defensive coach like Rod Wright and that coach on that coaching staff, coaching the defensive lineup to have a career franchise high of sacks last year, the trust is we'll find a player with traits that you like, and when we bring them in, whether it be early or late, you should be able to coach them up. Now I want to move forward to look at Tank Dell. Sarge, you know who Tank Dell is?
I think I do, and I'm glad that we call him Tank, because if you call him by his government name, his government first name, he's not going to respond to you.
Nathaniel. Speedy recovery to Tank Dell. But we also know that Tank is a fighter. We also know that Tank is a guy that made a way to get to U of H, right? Started his career at Alabama A&M before transferring to community college and got his opportunity to get over to U of H. And once he got there in his final 2 seasons, lit it up for himself to help get himself drafted in the 3rd round to stay in Houston and play for the Houston Texans. Now he will be out for 2025. That does put pressure on the Houston Texans to not only find someone to come in and help elevate the room, but also find a immediate replacement production-wise for Tank Dell. And it sucks because before he went down last year, he was really starting to get into his groove, and the play he got injured on, he still caught the touchdown. For Houston and for Tank Dell, does that spell trouble if they find a player that replicates what Tank Dell does and also just adds to the success of 2025?
I think that one of the main things that the Houston Texans are going to have to look at, and this is definitely going to fall on the shoulders of offense coordinator Nick Caley and wide receivers coach Ben McDaniels. What type of productivity do you think that you're going to get in year 2 from a Christian Kirk? Now, the reason why I say that,
so for 2026,
and the reason why I say that is because if you think that you're going to, if he still has a lot of quote unquote meat left on the bone, if he still is very productive and you think that he can be productive, then you go out and you draft a wide receiver 2 as far as someone that can play on the outside. And if you look at if the Texans jump up to draft Matthew Golden, I think that spells trouble for Tank Dell, because they're not going to jump up for a guy, jump up high to take a guy like that in order for him to play behind anybody. And so, but if they're looking at, okay, so let's go ahead and roll with what we got, and then we may be able to pick up a Jalen Royals in the second or third round, somebody that we can bring in, but he still realizes and knows that Tank is going to be the starter once he comes back. That's the only problem and the issue that I have, is that you know the rule is you don't lose your job to injury. That's one of the reasons why Kenyon Green was able to come back and start for the Houston Texans, because they said, hey, look, you got injured. That's unfortunate. Let's bring you back, put you back in your starting position. And then after that, we have to see what you can do there. And so I feel that's going to be that should be the same way for Tank. But by the same token, what the team needs in 2025 is a wide receiver 2. Unless you're going to say, hey, Christian Kirk is going to be our wide receiver 2. We'll draft wide receivers later on. And, we will draft wide receivers later on in the draft to put in that spot, to hold the spot, to be a placeholder until Tank Dell comes back. But if they take a player like Matthew Golden,
by the way,
go ahead and say it again.
That would be a mistake, finding a placeholder until X player comes back. Unless that player is a quarterback, or unless that player is, it's kind of hard to describe, but I think for Houston, it would be a mistake to wait on Tank Dell for the following year. We've talked about it, how they need to operate and maximize in their window. I think that would be a huge mistake for Houston.
So if they go out, okay, so let me ask you a question. What do you think that Matthew Golden can do that Tank Dell can't?
I think Matthew Golden can do everything that Tank Dell can.
So that's what I'm saying. So if you get a Matthew Golden, now that kind of makes Tank expendable, unless you think that, hey, what I got in Christian Kirk is only going to last for so long, and then now we're going to start thinking about, and Tank does not like to play on the inside, but I'm pretty sure that they could sell him on playing on the inside, in the slot position. I'm pretty sure that CJ and they work together coming back, he could sell him into playing that position. But if they think that Christian Kirk is going to be productive for like 2 or 3 years, then they go out and they draft, and they jump up early to draft. I'm just using Matthew Golden as an example. We'll know a lot. Like I said, John, we'll know a lot after the draft, of course.
Absolutely.
But if they draft a wide receiver at 25 or jump up to get a wide receiver, then John, I think that's going to the other C word outside of culture, it's going to cause competition. But then you're going to be looking at like, well, did we use a draft pick in the first round to start this guy, or are we going to wait till later rounds to find a place?
No, yes, absolutely. If you trade up or you outright draft a player at 25, you absolutely are drafting that player to start right now. That player, especially if you trade up, that player is a part of your absolute now needs. And so this year, next year, and the year after that, barring any injury, he's a part of the future. And I think the trouble for Tank really may come down to playing wise for his money long term.
Yeah.
That's a huge blessing. And we talk about blessings in disguise, right? And I don't want to use that for, using injury to highlight a blessing, but that's a huge blessing for Houston to find themselves in. Next year, we get this weapon back.
Yeah.
Next year, if we do what we need to do in this draft and we bring in the player or players that we like and believe that they can execute in this offense, then when we get Tank Dell back, you have CJ Stroud playing like a point guard type of quarterback with all of the weapons at his expense.
Where you put Tank though? If you draft Matthew Golden, where you put Tank?
I'm glad you said that. I talked to Tank Dell in the locker room this year, and this is the first time I realized something was wrong. The conversation was brief. The conversation was not long, and as a matter of fact, when I talked to Tank Dell, I don't want to put nothing on him, but it felt like he was very upset with his role at the time. You know what this happened? This is when Nico Collins went down. I said, Tank, do you feel like your role has changed with Nico? You know what he told me? I don't feel like my role has changed at all. And the manner in which he said it came off as, I'm not being utilized and used on the football field like I should be. And so it doesn't matter where Tank lines up. Is he a threat with the ball in his hands? Yes or no? Well, we also feel like yes. So it's up to Kaylee and the offensive coaching staff and CJ to say, hey, listen, you may not be outside, but you're still a weapon and a very effective one wherever we line you up on the field. We'll still find those matchups to give you favorable one-on-ones to make those explosive plays like you like. And so the trouble would be if he wants to stay in Houston long-term and maybe financially they're not able to do that because the guy who's coming in by year 2 maybe has surpassed him in terms of impact on the field. Got to keep in mind, Tank Dell is the last 2 seasons, he's ended the year off not on the football field. And I hate to use that. But for Tank and for Houston, if they can work something out and say, hey, listen, man, we really love you. We keep you. And when you're on the field, you and CJ are like, y'all locked in, then it could be a blessing for both parties.
Well, I'm gonna tell you like this, because you play slick Casario. I'm gonna play trick Casario. All right, I'm gonna put on my trick Casario vest, and I'm saying I'm honestly looking at. I need to draft a guy that can play outside and inside. That can play the outside and the slot position, because I know what I have in Tank, and I don't know if him coming back off of injury like that, the way that he was injured, that gruesome injury. And you said, just like you said, his last 2 seasons, he's ended he's ended the season on the injured reserve. And John, he hasn't had an opportunity to put on his NFL weight just yet because he's always rehabbing. And so I don't know if I want to send him across the middle like that, knowing that he hasn't filled out into his NFL body just yet. I don't want to, in that slot position, I'm sending him into the den, into the Lions den. And you got linebackers that are waiting. You got safeties that are going to be waiting. Nickel corners. You got defensive linemen dropping back into coverage. That imagine if Will drops back in coverage and see a player like Tank coming in, he gets the ball. It's going to try to dismantle him. And so if I'm, since I'm Trick Casario right now, I'm drafting a guy that can play outside and inside. That way, when Tank comes back, I know. Listen, I know he's injured on he's ended on injury reserve, but John, we know what we have in him.
He's a weapon. We
know that when he's on the field, he's productive and he can be used. And I'm gonna tell you this, John. Tank wasn't the only one that felt like that in what he told you.
Yeah, I know, and it was the mood of the locker room. I think so.
Yep.
We got to talk about biggest blessings in disguise for Houston. Thank you guys for sticking around to this point. I want to say this, man. I am a huge fan of Tank Dell.
I am as well.
Where this all could play out in favor for Houston is, again, getting him back, going into his 4th year with a wide receiver that will be going into his 2nd year in this new offense. That is just weapons and weapons for CJ Stroud to dish out the rock and have an explosive offense. And whether or not he stays in Houston or not, a healthy Tank Dell spells trouble for defenses. When we come back, we'll talk about blessings and disguises. A big blessing in disguise for y'all. The NBA playoffs are almost here. Got the play-in games going on. The playoffs kick off Saturday, and FanDuel is giving new customers an incredible way to get in on the action. No, you don't got to go to the park and get up your threes. No, you don't got to hit the gym and practice on your layup drills. All you got to do is be a first-time customer with FanDuel. Place your first $5 bet, and you'll get $250 in bonus bets if you win. And I love how FanDuel is making it easy, whether you're picking your favorite team or diving into player props. From three-pointers to steals to assists, FanDuel has so many ways to bet your favorite player props. Plus, after the game tips off, you can combine live game, same game prop bets into same game parlays for a big chance to win. Don't miss out. Head to FanDuel.com and claim your $250 in bonus bets today. Welcome back in, Locked On Texans listeners and viewers. Thank you for making the Locked On Texans your first listen. Today, for your second listen, check out Locked On NFL Draft with Damian Parsons and Keith Sanchez. Now that the season is over, get the latest draft rankings, rumors, and news every day. Find Locked On NFL Draft on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcast. Sometimes things happen for a reason, Sarge.
Yeah.
If you didn't make it right, and because you went left, you didn't run into that car.
Yep.
Right? Because you went home that night, you don't got triplets running around, right? Things happen for a reason, man.
Arrows early.
And for the Houston Texans, I think ultimately we can look at last season. While it was a disappointment for a lot of people, and I think that they view it as a disappointment with how things ended in Kansas City, though they had the opportunity to put the champs away. For Houston, some things happened last year that kind of we questioned in season, or pissed us off in season, that ultimately ended up being a blessing in disguise. And for me, it was the Detroit Lions game. Why? Well, they had the lead in that game up until the 5-minute mark in the fourth quarter. You know how many times they had to put away the Detroit Lions after 5 interceptions and that defensive performance? Time and time again. They were not able to do it. And Sarge, what started happening? What rumors, what rumblings started to happen after that game?
Oh, right after that game, Bobby's head was on the chopping block. Bobby's time in Houston was, you know how they had those little hourglasses inside of the sauna. You flip it over to, the time. Bobby's sand was dripping quickly through that sand glass, and his time of being in Houston as the Texans offense coordinator.
I would say that once that hourglass flipped from the Detroit Lion game, it was already a quarter full.
Yeah.
And that sand in the glass take a little minute to get flowing.
Yep.
It was already a quarter full. So I look at that game being probably the biggest proponent to Houston having that decision to say we need to move on from Bobby Sloyd.
Yeah.
And not only that game, I mean, you look at the New York Jets game, there were plenty of games and plenty of moments where you could go back and point to this is the reason why Bobby Sloyd was let go, including the playoff game against Kansas City, where he had Dalton Schultz lined up against George Karlaftis, which led to 3 sacks, right?
Yep.
But I think ultimately, overall, the Detroit Lions game, primetime, national TV game, 5 interceptions, you make Jared Goff, who at that point was looking like an MVP candidate, look like Jared Goff with Jeff Fisher calling the plays. You allow that game to end up in a loss because of your inefficient offense. That is where I think the blessing in disguise for Houston started, and which is why we now are talking about what does Nick Haley offense look like and what would his influence on the draft look like moving forward, because they had to get Bobby up out of there.
Yeah, one of the biggest things that happened after that game, John, is the statement that Bobby Sloyd made, I want to say like 2 weeks later, when I asked him about the halftime adjustments, because coming out of that game, and you think about it, you could almost see the writing on the wall in that game, John, because what happened in the very first offensive series for the Houston Texans, right out after halftime, CJ threw an interception. And you say, uh-oh. Now, combine that interception with the fact that he missed Tank Dell on a touchdown. That's the same game, right? He missed Tank Dell on a touchdown pass. And I think that he also, the guy who, the defensive back who intercepted him,
was that Carl Davis?
After I don't remember, but whoever the defensive back for the Detroit Lions was, he intercepted. That was his second interception of the game because he got one in the first half and he got one. That was the second one. And so I want to say about 2 weeks later, I'm talking to Bobby, and I asked him about being able to make the halftime adjustments. What is it about coming out of halftime that you all can't seem to get going? I asked him that specifically, and Bobby said, "Hey man, it ain't like there's no secret stuff that they have in the back. You remember that? It's not like they have any secret stuff, that they use in the locker room to make them make any type of adjustments. There aren't many adjustments that are being made." And I'm saying to myself, no, Bobby, you got to send the trainers over when the Detroit Lions is out of the locker room. Send them over there because Ben Johnson, that's the offensive coordinator name at the time, correct? The head coach of the Chicago Bears now. Hey, the Lions offensive coordinator got a cooler full of secret stuff because he used it on the Houston Texans and made the adjustments in real time for Jared Goff, who had a terrible game, but he made those adjustments. Hey man, you don't remember the secret stuff that Kevin O'Connell had when you went to Minnesota? Like, it's like some of these offensive coordinators, some of these seasoned offensive coordinators, hey Bobby, they got the secret stuff. And that's the stuff that you need. But you're saying they got no secret stuff over there. No, Bobby, what are you thinking about? I always wondered if Bobby had one of those, because Bobby's very smart. Let me not take that away from him. But it's almost like he going there one of them hand fidget widget type things. He just sitting there and like, I wonder what the QBR of blah, blah, blah is. I'm like, no, Bobby, you need to be coming up with some stuff. You need to have a secret a secret Microsoft Surface tablet that don't nobody know about that says Bobby's secret stuff. And that's what you pull out in case of emergency. Go to that and give me. And so, yeah, John, you could just see the writing on the wall. And not only could you see it starting to take a toll on Bobby Slowick, it started to take a toll on the players. It started to take a toll on the other coaches. It started to take a toll on the organization as a whole. And you're saying to yourself, ooh, hey, Bobby, it's been real.
That's one of those situations where the owners, I'm sure, looked around and said, because you don't have, it would be different if, and I'm not trying to be disrespectful before we close out. It'd be different if that was Davis Mills. It'd be different if that was one of these TJ Yates or Desmond Ridder type of quarterbacks. It'd be different. But you are not gonna have my quarterback, who I've been praying for, especially after the last quarterback. You're not gonna have him out on that field looking like that. So that was probably the biggest blessing in disguise. Yeah, they lost that game. Yeah, that offense was bad. Yeah, in the second half, they had a missed field goal, 2 interceptions, and 3 to 4 drives that ended in punt. 3 of those drives were 6 plays or less. Yeah, that looked bad on national TV. But hopefully now the savior of the offense, Nick Caley and Cole Popovich, is in the building.
You call him the savior?
He could be. He could compared to what we saw last year.
I'm sorry, it's getting close to Easter. My bad. Go ahead. Carry on.
And on the 3rd season, he rise. CJ Stroud. They killed him. They got him out of there last year. They rolled it in front of his tomb. They rolled a Kansas City tomb in front of his grave.
He died. Oh, he died. But on the 3rd day morning, he got up.
And he woke up. And he threw another touchdown. We hopefully this is the savior of this offense, man. Thank y'all for watching today's show. Please subscribe, like, and comment on YouTube. Of course, we're joking, no disrespect. Yeah. Subscribe, like, and comment on YouTube, and follow me on Twitter at John_Hickman12.
Make sure you follow me on the app formerly known as Twitter at Big Star Sports with a Z at the end.
Until next time, ladies and gentlemen, Saints. Brothers and sisters, everyone.
Let the podcast say what?
Amen.
Amen.
Peace.